Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Fantasy Football Friday here on Spartan Fantasy Football. My name is Steven Psihogios, and I've got to start off by saying I am so excited right now and so happy. My guys, Bruno Mars, Anderson Paak, Silk Sonic just came out with a new song, Skate. Great tune, got me fired up for the weekend. The Blue Jays, I'm based out of Toronto area. They're back in Toronto playing tonight, their first game ever, the first sporting event ever, back in Toronto, back in Canada since the pandemic started. It's a good day. It is a good day to have a good day. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing here on Fantasy Football Friday. And let's not waste any more time. Let's dig into the big, juicy meal of the day when it comes to news from the NFL. And that was Carson Wentz dealing with a foot injury. It is said to be bone and ligament injury in his foot. The Colts are reportedly bracing for surgery, which is not good. Surgery, we're still 6 weeks out from the regular season, so there's still time, but not good news, especially when you look at the quarterback depth on this Indianapolis team. They have Jacob Eason and Sam Ellinger sitting right behind Carson Wentz. Not encouraging. Really wish you had Jacoby Brissett right about now. At least he's somewhat capable of running this offense. We haven't seen it from either Eason or Ellinger. And, Eason, this is his second year. He was a fifth-round pick. You have Ellinger, who was okay at Texas. He's not someone that I'm excited about the prospect of having him start. And he's probably behind Eason anyways on the depth chart. So a really tough spot here for the Indianapolis Colts if this is long-term for Carson Wentz. We know he's had an injury history in the past. He's always been banged up. Unfortunately, it happened really early here for Indianapolis, but it could be fortunately. It could be better now than later for the Indianapolis Colts to worry about finding a backup for Carson Wentz. But this is a team, by all intents and purposes, that is looking to compete right now. They are not trying to kick this can down the road and try to compete in 2, 3, 4 years. Indianapolis wants to start winning games, making deep playoff runs now. They made the playoffs last year. They lost to Buffalo, but you can bet they want to make a run this season. So not a great start for the Indianapolis Colts after they went and they made that splash, bringing in Carson Wentz this year. So we'll see how that plays out. But obviously in fantasy football, that downgrades everyone around Carson Wentz. I'm talking Paris Campbell, who was someone I was really looking forward to seeing how they performed. Encouraging start to last season. Then he gets hurt week 2. Not great. Same with a guy like Michael Pittman entering his second season. He's now going to have a different quarterback. He was already going to have a different quarterback throwing him the ball in year 2. Now it might not even be the guy he thought it was. So that's not good. And then also you throw in T.Y. Hilton there. I wasn't overly interested in T.Y. Hilton anyways, but this doesn't make matters any better. So not great news here for the Indianapolis Colts. Like I said, this downgrades all the pass catchers. It might actually vault Nyheim Hines up a little bit as he can work as a dump-off guy. If you got questions, comments, observations, takeaways from any of the news I'm going to be talking about today, let me know in the chat. Always reading it, always looking to get your feedback. So a rough start here for Indianapolis in training camp. We thought maybe, potentially, this was a team that was poised to maybe make a Super Bowl run this year. They made the playoffs last year with a Phillip Rivers who just kind of guided the ship. He didn't lift the offense. If anything, he maybe held it back a little bit because of his lack of mobility, because of his lack of arm strength. Now you have a guy who Carson Wentz got some mobility, has the arm strength, but now he's hurt. Durability has been the biggest problem for Wentz in his career, and it's striking again here early in Indianapolis, and that depth chart is not encouraging behind him. It'll be interesting to see if they try to make a trade to acquire someone to supplement this. But like I said, Paris Campbell takes a hit. T.Y. Hilton takes a hit. Michael Pittman Jr., they all take a hit. Even the running backs, you got to think less opportunities in the red zone if there's no Carson Wentz. Because I'll tell you right now, a Jacob Eason offense isn't going to run as efficiently as a Carson Wentz offense. And that is irregardless of what you think about Carson Wentz. Jacob Eason is not on that level, and neither is Sam Ellinger. So it's a tough break for fantasy managers, tough break for Indianapolis Colts fans because, hey, the Tennessee Titans are right there. They improved this offseason too offensively. The defense probably took a step back, but offensively, the Titans got better. They added Julio Jones. That's a tough break for the Indianapolis Colts. Like I said, just instant reaction. When the quarterback goes down, it hurts everyone else in the offense. Look at what happened last year with Dak Prescott in Dallas. Everyone suffered. Zeke suffered. The receivers suffered. It's just not a good situation. So tough little tidbit of news there for Indianapolis Colts fans, but we'll see. We still don't have an official diagnosis yet. So don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but obviously the early sign is not promising for Carson Wentz. Next, moving over to Detroit, Motor City, Dan Campbell has called the Lions backfield a 1-2 punch. If you're a DeAndre Swift fantasy manager, that's not what you want to hear. You want to hear that this is the unquestioned number one bell cow back. But even dating back to DeAndre Swift's days at Georgia, this wasn't someone who was handling 20 plus touches a game. If I'm not mistaken, Swift was averaging about 17 touches a game at Georgia. So he was never a heavy workload back. So I'm not too concerned about Jamal Williams mixing in here. I think it actually works best for DeAndre Swift to have a similar configuration as to what Joe Lombardi and what Dan Campbell and the Saints had, where you had Latavius Murray as kind of that bruising back to spell Alvin Kamara every once in a while. I think that's what you're going to see here. DeAndre Swift is going to be your Alvin Kamara, and you're going to have Jamal Williams being your Latavius Murray. Both backs profile pretty similar to how the configuration was in New Orleans. So when I see DeAndre Swift is going to serve in a 1-2 punch backfield, I'm not getting concerned. I like Swift. If you can get a late third round, and I've seen him going there, mid to late third round, I'm jumping on that because I think that's a legitimate high-end RB2, especially in PPR leagues where there's going to be a lot of pass catching work. I think that is the play. And with this piece of news, his ADP might slide even more now. And hey, I'm going to be the guy jumping on it if he's there in the fourth round, because that is a steal. Now we're getting into complete bargain territory. But right now I like the ADP. I think that I'm not overly concerned. I think he's the better running back of the two, to be quite frank, and he's going to get the important touches. He's going to be the receiving back. I think you're going to see him in the red zone as well. So not overly concerned about DeAndre Swift. Capitalize on those who aren't in Dynasty. If you got someone in your Dynasty league that's a little concerned by the Jamal Williams news, or even just in season-long league, I throw them an offer. But I'm not worried. I think he'll be just fine. Next, going to Denver, talking more quarterback talk here. In the quarterback battle in Denver, there's apparently no separation. Both have looked good. And that's what they say. Both have looked good. But I always say if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. And I think that's where the Denver Broncos are. You have Drew Lock, who obviously the upside and the flashy playability is much higher than it is with Teddy Bridgewater. Bridgewater's not going to be the flashy, throw it deep down the field guy, stretching the field. He's going to be the guy who, he'll take whatever you give him underneath. He'll pick you apart underneath to a degree. Drew Lock, we know to a fault, loves going deep, loves the deep ball. And I think that is his undoing, is that he has no restraint. And we saw Josh Allen kind of hone that in for the Buffalo Bills. We haven't seen that done with Drew Lock yet. He was chucking that ball however many times a game downfield. And I mean, you heard the report today that he connected on a nice deep ball with KJ Hamler. That's great. That's great. But I would like to see a little bit more accuracy in the red zone. I would like to see a little bit more accuracy outside the numbers on the field. I don't think Drew Lock is a complete package. And this is a team we know they've tried to acquire other quarterbacks this offseason. They were linked to Aaron Rodgers heavily. They were linked to Deshaun Watson earlier before that legal situation picked up. So interesting little situation there. I think day one, you're going to have Teddy Bridgewater starting. I think that's the best for fantasy football because he can at least get the ball in your playmakers' hands. Carolina had 3 top 25 wide receivers last year in PPR. So he can make receivers fantasy relevant. Sure, those receivers probably didn't deliver as much as you thought, although Robbie Anderson went above and beyond anybody's expectations. But you had a guy like DJ Moore maybe fall a little short. But Curtis Samuel had a good year. So, hey, you know what? Teddy Bridgewater will be the best quarterback that Courtland Sutton has ever played with if Bridgewater is the guy who's named the starter. And a guy like Jerry Jeudy, I think, will stand to benefit as well because he's someone who can be a yak monster. You've seen the after the catch skill with Jerry Jeudy. That's what made him such a highly coveted receiver coming out of Alabama, was when you get the ball in Jerry Jeudy's hand, he can juke the jockstrap off the defender. So that's what I'm expecting here in Denver. I expect Bridgewater to win the battle and for it to lift everyone in that offense. I think it helps Jeudy. I think it helps Sutton. I think it helps Fant. So both QBs have looked okay so far. So we'll see how that one continues to develop. Now, this piece of news might back some people off of this guy. He's going in the first round right now, but it was reported today that Ezekiel Elliott might have some of his workload scaled back. This was from Mike McCarthy because they want to keep him fresher for the playoffs. And I just think if you're the Cowboys, this makes sense. And I've been proactively ranking Tony Pollard a little bit higher than consensus because I think Pollard has standalone value. I think the Cowboys saw last year when Zeke wasn't playing those last couple of games, oh, we got another really explosive back who isn't fragile. Like Pollard has 3-down running back size, and he is a burner. He brings something Zeke doesn't bring, which is straight line speed. So I think that is a big plus and something that why not use if you're the Dallas Cowboys? If you don't have to trot Zeke out there and run him into the ground, why not keep him fresh, get Pollard mixed in a little bit more? That's going to bring Zeke back down a bit in fantasy football because we know that volume is king, especially for Ezekiel Elliott. So maybe that brings him back to the mid part of the first round. But I still like Zeke as a first-round target. I think having Prescott back is going to help. But staying on that note, Dak Prescott, we're hearing that the Cowboys are leaning later rather than sooner when it comes to bringing Dak back from this arm injury that he suffered. Not encouraging that Dak now has an arm issue just coming back in training camp after missing all of last season. So that's not a promising note. But like I said, we're still 6 weeks out from the regular season. There's lots of time for this thing to heal. Dak is a player that you'd like to see get a lot of reps in preseason, though, just because he is coming back from a brutal injury. So that is one thing that is a little concerning about Dak now having this injury, is that you want to see him get those reps. You want to see how he's doing, how he is with his mobility, gaining the familiarity with the offense again. He's been in this offense for quite some time, but you want to see him mixed in with a new weapon like CeeDee Lamb. You want those reps, especially when you've been off for as long as he has. So I'll probably move Dak back a little bit in my rankings. I had him very high in my rankings already. I had him as QB3. So I'll probably bring him back down to probably that QB5, QB6 range with this news, just because there was the uncertainty already with the injury he suffered last year, and now he's got another one. So that's where I'm with Dak Prescott. But otherwise, in other quarterback news, New Orleans, Taysom gets Taysom Hill gets first team reps today for the New Orleans Saints to open up training camp, which read into it what you want. I've heard other reports saying that Jameis Winston's looked really solid for the New Orleans Saints. So that's something to keep in mind as well. That battle, I think it's going to go right up until the season starts. I think these are two quarterbacks that are pretty close together. Hill, there's more financial incentive. They're more financially incentivized to start Taysom Hill because of the big contract they just gave him, New Orleans. New Orleans just backed up the Brinks truck for Taysom Hill this offseason, where Winston's making a significantly less amount of money. So that is one thing that might play into this battle. I've heard Winston looks very good, and ultimately they'll probably go with whoever looks the best if it's not that big of a difference. But now you have Michael Thomas also out in this offense, which is a bit of a problem because we know Michael Thomas is a game-changing wide receiver. And this wide receiver room behind Michael Thomas doesn't have a lot of game changers. Traquan Smith has had opportunities in the past to really vault himself into a clear number 2 spot, and he hasn't really done that. They also have Marquez Callaway, who's an interesting player as far as size and speed, but we still haven't seen that at the NFL level either. Ultimately, Adam Troutman is probably the biggest winner of all this. I really moved him up in my tight end rankings when the Michael Thomas news happened. So His value probably doesn't move as much depending on who the quarterback is, because we've seen tight ends be safety valves for quarterbacks. So even for a guy like Taysom Hill, he might lean on the tight end a little bit more. But I think ultimately, fantasy football wise, for all these options, you want it to be Winston, but we'll see how it plays out. Taysom Hill gets the first team reps. He'll get the first crack in training camp, but they've already said they're going to alternate back and forth. So we'll see how Winston performs as well. I've heard all indications say that he is playing well. So we have that. One thing I didn't talk about earlier this week, Aaron Rodgers, he's coming back to Green Bay, which means you can put him back up as a QB, top 6, top 5 QB in fantasy football. He belongs in that conversation. Devontae Adams, he belongs back in the overall wide receiver 1 conversation. This is a team that still doesn't have a lot of competition outside of Adams for targets. Sure, they bring back Randall Cobb, but he's 30 at this point. He's not the same Randall Cobb. He'll probably be a little bit more heavily involved. They have Amari Rodgers. They have Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They have Alan Lazard. They have some options, but there's no question that Devontae Adams is the guy that this offense will center around when it comes to receiving options. You can move Aaron Jones back up in your rankings. Like I said earlier, when I was talking about the Indianapolis Colts and Jonathan Taylor, his value takes a hit because Carson Wentz is out. The offense isn't going to run as efficiently in Indianapolis, which means less red zone attempts. And we know touchdowns are huge for running back scoring in fantasy football. So you have a guy like Aaron Jones who knows he's going to have Aaron Rodgers back. You could almost put Aaron Jones ahead of Jonathan Taylor if we find out this Carson Wentz injury is going to take him out for quite a while. Aaron Jones was someone who was sneaking into that early round 2 part. I think you got to throw him now with Aaron Rodgers back, right back into the mix as a top 6, top 5 running back in fantasy football, because we have that certainty that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback. He's going to see the red zone quite frequently on this talented Green Bay team. So that's how the Rodgers news really changes everything. Robert Tonyan gets a bit of a boost as well because we have certainty. Aaron Rodgers is coming back. It's the opposite in Indianapolis now. Everyone takes a step back because we don't have Carson Wentz, including the running backs. So now we can go back, look at Aaron Rodgers, say, okay, Rodgers is coming back. Everyone gets a lift with Aaron Rodgers back. Another interesting note from training camp from this week, Terrace Marshall is getting reps in the slot, replacing Curtis Samuel. We know Samuel operated a lot out of the slot last year. So now we're seeing Terrace Marshall get those looks. And that's fine with me. I think Marshall, ideally, after the season, will flex out wide. He'll take Robbie Anderson's spot. But for the time being, having him serve as that big slot is good. He's going to see the field as a rookie, and I think that's what you want to see. Terrace Marshall, there was underlying medical concerns people had in the lead up to the draft. I thought this was someone who deserved to be in the first round conversation. Joe Brady knows him well, coached him at LSU, takes him with Carolina. Nobody has a better read on that situation than Joe Brady. And he was completely fine selecting him, which tells me the medical issues might be a little bit overblown. I think he's a nice dart throw late in your draft. If there was something, I hope nothing happens to DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson, but if something happens, he's flexing out wide to be your number 2 wide receiver in that offense. And I think that's going to be a pretty fantasy relevant position. You got to remember, 1 season ago, in Joe Brady's first crack as offensive coordinator in the NFL, 3 wide receivers were in the top 25. So Terrace Marshall replacing Samuel in the slot right now, that's great news for his value. I like him as a late round flyer. He was someone that I was proactively drafting in dynasty leagues as well that I'm in, because I like the size profile. I like the speed. He was one of the winners of pro days this year. There weren't a whole lot of players who had great pro day numbers. He was one of them. So again, I'm coming back around. I'm in on Terrace Marshall late in fantasy drafts as a sleeper in fantasy football. Lastly, I'm going to talk about Will Fuller dealing with an undisclosed injury. And this is going to be interesting because last year, drafting Will Fuller, you got the injury discount baked into his ADP. Like he couldn't do any worse than where you were drafting him. He was going like 9th round, 8th round. And when he was healthy, he was a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy football. And when he wasn't suspended, I should say, he was a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy football. Obviously, he got dinged for PEDs. He's going to be suspended for the first game of this season as well. But now we have the injuries, and it's the same old story with Will Fuller. I'm probably going to stay away unless his ADP really starts to drop in fantasy football. But as of right now, I'm probably just going to back off of Will Fuller. Miami's offense, I think, is one that it's really hard to get a read on because you add Jalen Waddle, who I like. I think he's okay. They reached on him. They shouldn't have taken him as early as they did. Speedsters in the top 10. In the first round in general, there's not a great track record. Marquise Brown hasn't lived up to expectations. John Ross, Henry Ruggs, he's still 1 year in. He could turn it around, but there's not a great track record of these undersized speedsters getting it done in the NFL. But now with Will Fuller sidelined, you kind of have Waddle to play this role of the speedster all to himself. Fuller and Waddle are very similar players. So that's why I had a hard time picking up a read on this Miami offense. You also have Devontae Parker still there, Mike Gesicki. They added Hunter Long at tight end. Myles Gaskin's going to get a lot of work out of the backfield too. So I was really kind of conflicted with this offense. If Will Fuller's injury does cost him time, it's definitely worth sliding Waddle up your board. But if you find out he's going to be back soon, even with his sketchy health past, I'm staying away from Waddle because I really don't know what they're going to do with Fuller and Waddle. Like, you're just going to run those guys straight down the field every single play because they're basically the same player. They're very redundant assets in this Miami offense. They got two speedsters. And you got Devontae Parker as well, who I'm not very interested in fantasy. There's a lot of questions. Miami's offensive line didn't get much better this offseason, and that was a sore spot last year. So Tua's not going to have boatloads of time to make decisions. And when you got speedsters, sure, you can run them on slants. You hope they can get open quickly. But when you want to run Fuller downfield and hit him on a deep ball, will Tua have that time to hit Will Fuller on a deep ball or hit Jalen Waddle? That remains to be seen because the O-line is still suspect in Miami. It's largely the same. They spent a second-round pick, Liam Hickenson or something like that, I think was the player they took in the second round. His last name brutally there. But they did spend up on a right tackle who might be the blindside protector, who they hope can be the blindside protector for Tua Tagovailoa. I'm going to keep the stream going for a few more minutes now. If you got any questions, comments, observations, takeaways from what I've said so far, let me hear it in the chat. I'm always game. But yeah, that's basically what's going on in the NFL this week. If you've missed anything, this show is a great way to catch up and stay up to date in fantasy football. So a lot happening. Training camp is back. Football is back. It feels good to be back in the swing of things when it comes to the NFL. I've got NFL Network on all day, watching training camp live, seeing what's happening there, keeping up to date. But yeah, like I said, if you got any fantasy football questions, you got a question about your own league, you got a question, maybe a trade offer, you're going into a draft, you want to know something, let me know in the chat. I always read what's in the chat. So I will answer your question. Even if it's after this show is live and it's a recording, I will get back to you. So if you got a question, let me know in the chat. But that's basically what's going on in training camp right now in the NFL. This show gave you a great little refresher. Getting back into the swing of things. Training camps are underway. You can put on the old NFL Network and watch Inside Training Camp Live. There's new live content coming out of the NFL. It's good to be back. It's good to be back with the NFL. One other note I wanted to talk about too, and I'll keep the stream up for another couple minutes and I'll talk about this in the meantime. This keeps blowing my mind and I'm getting upset. The Jets are running Denzel Mims with the third team offense. Earlier this week, it was the second team offense. He wasn't getting any work with Zach Wilson and the ones. Now he's not getting any work with the twos. What are the Jets doing with Denzel Mims? This was your second round pick last year. He played 9 games, was out largely due to injuries. But now he's back. You got to assume he's under a full bill of health, but he's running with the third team offense. That is just mind-blowing to me. This is someone who's a size-speed mismatch, who profiles as a true alpha wide receiver in the NFL that is not getting run. So obviously something is up here. I don't know whether they're looking to dish him and get rid of him and trade him because they did draft Elijah Moore. They added Corey Davis. They're using Keelan Cole ahead of him, for crying out loud, in training camp. Even Braxton Berrios is getting run ahead of Denzel Mims. So What are you going to do with him, Jets? That's an interesting situation. That is an interesting one to watch. All right, I'm going to keep the stream going. 30 more seconds. You got 30 seconds if you got a last second question, comment, observation. But that's going to wrap up this training camp fantasy football Friday. It's good to be back. Like I said, I got the Jays jersey on. I'm in the Toronto area. We're getting live sporting events back tonight in Canada. This Jays game tonight is the first live sporting event in Canada since the pandemic hit that has fans in attendance. We're getting back to normal. I like that. We're getting back to normal. But that's going to do it for me. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Fantasy Football Friday on Spartan Fantasy Football. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you all again next Friday.